So good morning and welcome to Member Mondays. I'm Jerod Santek, Artistic Director at Right On Door County. And this week we are very happy to have Fran Wiedenhoeft with us in residence. Fran is from Madison and spent 22 years in the Army with service in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Desert Storm, and is working on a novel based on those experiences. So welcome, Fran, and first of all, thank you so much for your service to our country. It's greatly appreciated. So
Thank you.
can you tell us some more about the novel?
Yeah, it's a fictional story which a lot of the actual events in the story are inspired by, the kind of um events that were related to my service in Iraq. Once in a while, I have some scenes or components or events that happened in Afghanistan, but I kind of transpose them into Iraq and, with an Iraqi setting and Iraqi characters and so forth, just because there were some particular events that happened in Afghanistan that I thought would work with the story. The main character is a nurse anesthetist, which was my role. But the fictionalized part is, I was injured in Afghanistan, but it was not serious, and I continued to work. In the story, my character is gravely injured in Afghanistan in a missile strike, which actually happened. I was in a missile strike in Afghanistan, but I wasn't gravely injured. And her best friend is killed. So she's got some baggage from that. And so this is not uncommon for soldiers from any part of the service, from any specialty, to come home and, injured or not, feel like they left something undone and they have to go back one more time to fix it. And that's why you see people volunteering to go back over and over again. And I think that's hard for civilians who have not served in the combat zone to understand. It's like, you feel things were so messed up that you feel like if you just went back one more time, this time you could get it right. So she goes back one more time to try and get it right. And, much to the dismay of her husband, who ends up not speaking to her, and she deploys anyway. So that's the start of the story, is basically with her leaving him and deploying. And the trajectory of the story is, she starts off feeling very hopeful that this time she will get it right. And this time she's going to be the super anesthetist. And this time she's going to be the super, mentor to all the people that are working underneath her. And she's going to be the super, officer who takes care of all of her people, and in the OR right down to, the people that scrub the floors and stuff. And then, the brutality of the events that just keep beating her over and over again, which, are the events of anybody working medical in a combat zone, the type of traumas that you see over and over and over again to, the service members and the little babies and the old people, and, over and over again. It just beats away at her and beats away at her until her resolve starts to break down, and she starts to break down, and she still has, another service member. And this is something that, women have to worry about, on the bases or with the men that they're serving with too. They, you have, your buddy is supposed to have your back, but there's a serious problem with sexual assault. So one of the people that is one of her battle buddies is somewhat brutally assaulted. So she's a caretaker of her. So it all culminates, and she has a this support system of people, an Iraqi female translator, and the chaplain, and the young woman who ends up getting assaulted, and the anesthetist she's mentoring. And she has this support system, and one by one they're kind of removed from her by deploying back, or in the case of the translator, she feels like she has to go home, to her home in Balad. And that's the kind of the peak of the story. And so it's how she copes with that, and how she manages to, that's like the pinnacle of the story. And then,
Well, it sounds wonderful. And I was happy to have been able to read an excerpt from the novel with your application for residency. You were originally scheduled to come last March, and then of course we went into shutdown, and that canceled your residency along with many others. So we're very happy that you're able to come this week. But what has the past year been like for you and for your writing?
it's been up and down. I mean, it started off, good because I was at home, but difficult in that it was, it coincided with, like for most families, it coincided with a lot of stressful events. I mean, I have a military retirement, and I have a guaranteed source of income, unlike a lot of people who ended up losing their jobs right away. But my daughter was laid off. My daughter lives in Madison, and she has 3 sons, but 2 that are still living at home. And her husband, is quite disabled, and he doesn't work. And so when she was laid off, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, how far can we stretch our pay, so that then, when they did the supplemental unemployment, that, then we had a deep breath. And then my oldest grandson was in grad school. He ended up finishing his graduate degree, but it coincided the end of his degree, which graduate students don't make a lot of money to begin with. And it coincided with the conception and birth of my first great granddaughter, which is a wonderful, joyful occasion. She's the best little baby ever, of course. And but that was stressful because they were on a tight budget, and babies are expensive.
Yes.
And it was a stressful birth because he couldn't be there, and she had some neonatal difficulties. Eventually they let him in, but once he got into the birthing room, he couldn't leave. It's like, so I would go through a little bit of this stress, and then I would write like crazy, and just really like block everything out and write. And then I would go through the stress, and then I would block everything out and write. And my grandsons, of course, they're computer schooling now, and I would like intensively spend time with them, and then I'd write, and I ended up writing 2 short stories as well, which it was time to create some new short stories. And I had the ideas, and, the children, being lost. I mean, there's a house around the street from us that a lot of families live there transiently. It's like housing that, it's kind of like the place that families go when they have nowhere else to go. It's like one of those long, low rows of, they look like caterpillars. It's like it's basically like a hotel room. The whole family lives in there. And I saw this little girl. She was pulling a sled that had all of her, like a couple little boxes. And she was pulling it up and she had this like look of resignation on her face. Like, this is what happens next to my family. And so that created this whole story, you know, a backstory for her, a front story, a current story. So I had that. I had another story that was waiting to get written. So I had a chapbook, which I hope will get published, which was all put together, but it needed to be refined. So it was good and bad. I would go through these little sections
We just lost your audio again, just right there at the end. So, or at least I did on my end. I don't know if it's a problem with my computer or not. So, but I know when you were scheduled to come last year, we were arranging for a writing program for local veterans group, which we're not able to do again this year. Just it's just not going to work out. We're hoping to do something similar, but I know you've been working with veterans and doing writing programs with them. Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, I I belong to a couple of veterans organizations, and one is Veterans for Peace, and it's primarily a peace and justice veteran organization of veterans that have come together and said, you know, we want to look beyond what our experiences were with war and with service and see what can we do to move society forward. But this past year was rough because a lot of the things we do are in-person events, and we had to move from you know, from, and I it was difficult to move. It's a lot of Vietnam era veterans, Korean War era veterans, older veterans. There's only a few of us who are younger era veterans, and we had to move to the virtual landscape. And that was a little bit, but part of what I was doing this year was talking about just what can we do to help each other, you know, and one of the best things we can do this year is to take care of each other. And part of that moving to the virtual landscape is let's share where we've been, let's share where we're at, let's share our visions. And I was surprised. It worked really well. Once I got them on to Zoom, and we've been using Zoom, um, and we have you know, we have email that we share the actual physical writing and then come together and talk about, you know, what we've done. It worked really well. I mean, people wrote and they shared, and I talked about, you know, there's different kinds of writing. There's writing that's cathartic, you know, and this is writing for me. You know, I may never share this with anyone. It may be the most difficult and painful parts of my life. It may be the most joyful. And then there's writing to share something that you want to create as part of a message, you know, and it's not completely unprecedented in our group. David Giffey, one of the founding members of the Chapter 3025 that I'm a part of, he published a book, Long Shadows, Veterans Paths for Peace. And it's myself and other members sharing their stories. So it's the writing of and the writing about a group cross-section of veterans. As far back as the Spanish Civil War, that was the oldest veteran that was in the group, to modern era veterans. So, and I've been sharing a little bit. There's been groups that I've participated in through the Wounded Warrior Project and also through the VA that it worked well to work with other people that were working on the same thing to help people share their stories or write and not share their stories, but also to develop enough writing craft or enough poetry structure to be able to share a message. And so, that's the foundation of what I was going to do with this short segment of writing that we were going to do in person last year. And if I can find a way to reach, veterans, I would still like to do it. I don't know. That was one thing I wanted to talk to you about. What your ideas were for how to accomplish this, or whether to wait for an in-person.
Yeah, we'll keep talking about that, because I'm very grateful for the work that you're doing with veterans, and getting them to share their stories, whether they feel comfortable sharing them with others or just getting it out on the page for themselves. I think that's wonderful, and I'm hopeful that we can work something out. In person, of course, would be lovely to do, but we're not sure when we can do that yet. Maybe not until late summer or fall, but we'll figure something out. So
Yeah, yep.
in the meantime, we're just happy that you are here with us finally after a year wait, and I hope that you have a really wonderful and productive week.